Hi guys, Russell here from Homebrew Republic. Welcome to another brew review. Today we're checking out the Mangrove Jacks Craft Series Kveik IPA. It's the #1 most viewed kit on my website, but it's not the most purchased kit. So my guess is there's a lot of interest and a lot of intrigue, but we all want to know what that finished product is before we jump in and try it ourselves, which is what we're going to do today. As I mentioned, it's another Craft Series kit. It's also a limited edition, which means it comes with dry hops and it comes with the Craft Series yeast, which is the Kveik yeast, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit more detail later. Going off the description on the packet, what we're expecting is a mouth-watering aroma of orange citrus and complex tropical fruits. The flavour profile is described as being smooth and clean on the palate with fruity notes and a firm, satisfying bitterness. The IBU, or International Bitterness Rating for this brew, is 48 to 56, which means we're going to have a really strong mid or a good mid-level bitterness coming through on the palate. This is the kit itself. I mentioned before it's one of the Mangrove Jacks Craft Series kits, and I'm increasingly a really big fan of these kits for a couple of reasons. First of all, we're using a premium malt, so we're getting a better malt, which means we're going to ultimately get a better finished product. The second reason though is if we listen to Mangrove Jacks, that the process used to fill these pouches is a cold filled nitrogen process, which is different to the warm canning process in the standard cans. Now what this means is we've got a premium malt going in, but the nitrogen filling process protects the characteristics both in terms of aroma and in terms of flavour that we have in the malt. So right now we've got a better quality malt, which means we're going to get a better quality finish. The other big reason that I love these kits is they come with a premium craft yeast. In this case it will be the Kveik yeast, and they come with hops. In this case it is 50 grams of Citra and Amarillo. So basically we're guaranteed to get a really awesome beer if we follow the instructions and apply a little bit of basic temperature control and obviously some cleaning and sanitization. So let's open this up and see what it looks like on the inside. The other reason that I really love these kits is they're very clever. So what we have is a wet side, which has our premium malt, which smells really awesome. What we have included in the dry side is the brewing instructions, 2 packets of the M12 Kveik yeast, and our dry hops, which was 50 grams of Amarillo and Citra. The description of the beer called for orange citrus and complex tropical notes for the aroma, followed through with strong fruity notes in terms of our flavour profile, which is exactly what is supported by the hops. The Citra obviously has a very strong citrus profile, which pulls through from lime and grapefruit, but we're heavily supported by tropical and floral fruit notes, which come through both in the aroma and in our flavour. What the Amarillo is going to give us is a strong orange citrus tone, both in terms of flavour and aroma, backed up by light floral notes. So what we've got here is 2 packets of the M12 Kveik yeast. This will be the second time I've used this yeast, and it's a really interesting yeast. First of all, it's going to help build up and help support subtle citrus tones in terms of our flavour, but the defining factor of this yeast is the fermentation temperature which it's capable of working at. So it has an a suitable range of 20 to 40 degrees, but an ideal range of 30 to 40 degrees, which makes it an incredible yeast to use if you don't have temperature control or if you're fermenting in very hot environments. The last thing to mention before we talk about process is we're using 1.2 kgs of liquid malt extract, and according to the packet we're expecting a final ABV of around about 5.5%. Alright, last thing guys, process. I've got my fermenting barrel behind me. I'm going to get it over onto the bench and we're going to get this mixed up. Because we use boiling water in the bottom to help the malts dissolve into our brew, the brew is going to be quite hot. For me that normally means between 30 and 40 degrees Celsius. So I'm going to use my fridge initially to bring the temperature down till I get to pitching temperature. That's where we get a bit interesting. Okay, so these instructions, one thing I've learned is they being Mangrove Jacks, use a generic set of instructions which go across all of their Craft Series kits. Now what they say is in the instructions is that if we're brewing an ale, the ideal fermentation range is between 20 and 25 degrees Celsius. But knowing what I know about the yeast, which we talked about before, we've got a suitable range between 20 and 40, or an ideal between 30 and 40. The last time I used this, I fermented at 30 degrees and got a really good result. Haven't quite decided on the spot, so I'm going to think about that overnight or during the day as my brew comes down to temperature, and I'll let you know what I decide when I pitch the yeast. Once we get this fermenting, the instructions are asking us to run for 7 days or until gravity gets down to 1.025, and then pitch our hops. From there, we will let fermentation play out. So I'm not putting a time limit on it, I just go by when gravity stabilizes. So we're looking for gravity to stabilize for 2 days constant, and I expect that will probably be around about the 1.010 mark, but we'll see when we get there, and I'll let you know. All that said, guys, I'm going to say too much talking, not enough brewing. I'm going to turn the camera off and get this brew on, and I'll see you guys on the other side for the taste test. Cheers. Done. Hey guys, welcome to the garage. So here's our brew. It has, I didn't actually end up turning the fridge on. I just put it in here and let it cool itself down a bit. So it came down here probably at midday. It's about 8 o'clock at night now, so 8 hours later. The current temperature, based on our little thermometer strip, is 26 degrees. Alright, there's our brew. Okay, like I said, 2 bags of yeast. 1, 2. That's it. Yeast in. As per instructions, I'm just going to leave this alone for 7 days, so the next time I check it will be at day 7, and I'll check specific gravity. If specific gravity is under 1.025 as per the instructions, we will introduce our hops. So all that said, that is me for the night. Take it easy, have a good weekend, catch you on the other side. Alright guys, we are 24 hours, or not even 24 hours after pitching the yeast. About this time yesterday, I set the brew up, and about 8 o'clock last night, pitched the yeast. So it's currently midday. Fermentation is on. Alright, our temperature, according to our thermometer strip, is currently 22 degrees. So the thing I have to clear up is what I am going to do about fermentation temperature range. And here's my dilemma. So the instructions, which are generic through the craft series, and they just basically say if you're doing an ale, stick between 20 and 25. But what we have here is Kveik yeast. So these 2 packets here are the ones that came with the kit. Now the issue I have is they've got nothing on them in terms of any kind of instructions. So the front just describes what it is. This is Kveik yeast. I had this in my fridge from another project, but exactly the same yeast, so same front, right? Thing is, on the back of this one, what this says on the back is suitable to ferment between 20 and 40 degrees, but for optimal results go for 30 to 40. So the assumption we make, I'll leave that down there, no I won't, pick it up. The assumption we make is that this yeast here is the same as what came out of those packets, given that the front labels are the same. And if we accept that assumption, then even though there's no further information on these, then we assume the information on temperature range would be correct. The last time I used the Kveik yeast, I fermented through at 30 degrees, worked really well. So I guess my basic two options would be to stick in the 20 to 25, and in fairness, it doesn't seem to be having any issues with that, given that it's on 20 now. The other option would be to push back up towards 30. I think what I'm going to do is just split the difference and broadly stick in the range of 25 to 30. Hey guys, welcome back. We are day 7, and if we look at the bubbler, there is zero activity, there's not even any pressure in there, so that's kind of suggesting fermentation is either a very, very low level or more or less complete. I also took a specific gravity reading last night, so the end of day 6, and we're down to 1.012, which is, I'd be surprised if there's much happening in there at this point. In terms of, excuse me, in terms of temperature, I ended up coming up and holding at 28, and the exciting thing for me anyway is that, if you can see, that is a digital thermometer, and what I have done is connected up a dual temperature controller to the fridge, which was ultimately used to keep it stable at that temperature. So all that said, let's get this lid off, check out what it looks like inside, and pitch our hops. Here we go. There is a very, very small level of fermentation activity left, which is great. So I guess that means we will probably be heading down, hopefully to at least 1.010, but possibly a wee bit under. We can see how active fermentation was. It was pretty active. And actually I talked about the defining features of the yeast earlier, but the other one, the one I focused on, was the temperatures at which the yeast is capable of fermenting at without creating off flavours. But the one that I neglected to mention was it's also a very fast fermenting yeast, so it's also unsurprising that fermentation is more or less completely done within 7 days. But all that said, we have our beautiful hops. So 50 grams, pre-packaged, US Amarillo and Citra, I think it was, and in they go. Completely commando, those will do their thing. So one thing I've learned, this is the second time I've used the Kveik yeast, and the yeast by itself creates a very distinctive and quite a strong citrus tone in the brew. So I tried the trial jar that I poured for the gravity reading, I tried that, and I can already taste a really, really strong citrus profile. It will be interesting where this goes. I'm hoping there's more Amarillo in those hops than there is Citra. Otherwise, I'm worried that the citrus notes will be very dominant, but I guess we'll see in the finished product. So from here, I'm not massively in a rush. Look, if I was in a rush, I'd probably say I'm going to leave the hops for 3 days and then start testing gravity to see if it's over. I'm happy for this to take another week
and to deal with this, to let fermentation have a full 2 weeks. So ultimately what I will do is probably give it, say 5 days. I'll take a gravity reading, no, 4 days. I'll give it 4 days. I'll take a gravity reading on 4 days from now. I'll take another gravity reading on the 5th day from now to confirm that we are well and truly finished. Assuming that we are, I will drop in findings. That will be 48 hours before I plan to bottle, and then I will at the same time turn the fridge to basically turn off temperature control and turn the fridge on. I'll do that 12 hours before I plan to bottle to cold crash it. Both of those 2 actions, the findings and the cold crashing, are going to help give me a really, really nice clear finish, which hopefully we will see when we do the final taste test. I always rack off using a siphon into a bottling bucket. I always use a sediment filter, so all of that's going to help me avoid any kind of organic matter in the brew created by those little guys in there. Yeah, but all that said and done, I think that's pretty much it. So I'm gonna say cheers, take it easy, and catch you guys on the other side. Welcome back to the official taste test of the Mangrove Jacks Craft Series Kveik IPA. Bottle, glass, pour. And there we have it, ladies and gentlemen, the Kveik IPA. So, okay, colour. This is quite similar to the last video I did, which was the New Zealand Pilsner. And what they said on the packet was that we would get a vibrant gold colour. I am aware that the colour from the lens looks a little bit different to what I get. So, without question, we've got those really, really strong, really nice gold tones, but I feel like it's a little bit darker. It's got this really rich depth to it. I kind of feel like it's somewhere between 9 and 11 on the SRM colour chart. We publish our own colour chart, or SRM colour chart. I'll drop a link below if you want to go check it out. So for me, it is a little bit closer to amber, but definitely have those gold tones, and yeah, like I said, really nice rich depth to the colour. As always, we've cleaned up really, really nicely for the finish. So no particles, nice and clear, looks really good. Aroma. Okay, this brew, all about the citrus, all about the citrus, and I'll say it one more time, just so we're clear, all about the citrus. What's interesting is the packet suggested that the primary tone of the citrus was going to be based on orange. For me, there's possibly hints of orange, but the primary tone is more grapefruit, which the citra hop. Grapefruit is the base for the citra hops. And as always, we're setting the scene for the flavour. And like I said, all about citrus. For me, this is the strongest citrus profile I've ever created in a beer. And when I shared it with people, because the name Kveik is pretty nondescript, I checked with them if they like citrus, and I told them it was a citrus IPA. So some of the feedback I got from one person, he said, if you want to call that a citrus IPA, it needs more citrus in it. Another friend of mine, he said a little bit too citrusy for me. I could drink it, but didn't really like it. And then another couple of people who did really like the citrus profiles, they basically came back and said really, really good brew. I think one of them gave it a 7 out of 10. So for me, and I'll talk a little bit more about the flavour in a second, the citrus in there was a little bit too strong for me. So I think, I said this before, but it's going to depend on whether you like your citrus profiles. If you like your citrus profiles, you're most likely going to really, really like this beer. If you don't like citrus, stay away from it. With the citrus as well, what I found, so I tried this first at 4 weeks, and the citrus was a lot more powerful than what it is now. This particular brew is now 10 weeks, and the citrus is probably 25% less. So for me, I would say it's now okay. If I was in a bar and I saw a citrus IPA and I wanted to try something different, I would enjoy it, but I probably wouldn't go back for the second. That's not a criticism of the beer, that's my personal preference for the citrus profile. Now the other thing that the packet talked about was these really, really strong tropical fruit notes. And they are there, both sitting behind the citrus on the aroma and behind the citrus in the taste. What I found, and I discovered this a bit by accident with this brew, if you let this brew warm up, the tropical notes become a lot more noticeable and a lot more prominent in the brew, particularly on the back of the citrus. There's plenty of kind of reading around online around what the ideal drinking temperature is for different beers. Lagers you drink a lot colder, you don't drink it straight out of the fridge. But there's a lot of people who advocate for drinking ales at a warmer temperature. So I found if I poured that and then left it for say 30 or 40 minutes and came back, it would still be cool, but not cold, as in straight out of the fridge. And at that temperature, like I said, the tropical notes were a lot more noticeable in the brew. So certainly something there to play with if you want to experiment. The other thing I would say is there's a really, really nice bitterness on the back of this. It's a bit stronger than normal. It's not overpowering bitterness, but I also think the brew had to have a slightly stronger bitterness because of the strength of the citrus. If the bitterness didn't have that strength, I think the citrus would drown it out and it would be all about the citrus. So I think we've done a good job on that front, and there's a really interesting kind of taste left in the mouth afterwards. It's this kind of tangy citrus with the bitter notes, so it's quite cool. It is an enjoyable brew. Okay, for me personally, I gave that a 6.5 out of 10. Now the only reason I was at 6.5 is because of my personal preferences towards the citrus profile, but like I said, it's got a lot going for it, and I think if you were into your citrus profiles and you really liked that, it would really please you. Like I said, another one of my friends gave it around about a 7, and even the guy who said to me, if you want it to be citrus, it needs to be more citrus, he was kind of like a 6.5. $1 million question: what does 6.5 mean? What does 7 mean? What does 10 mean? What does 1 mean? Everyone always asks me that, so I created a somewhat comical scale, a 1 to 10 scale. I called it the Homebrew Republic Brew Scale. I'll chuck a link below if you want to go and grab a copy. Just download it. It's there. It's available. I've also been on a bit of a break over the Christmas and New Year period, but I'm obviously back now. Got some awesome reviews coming up. The next one to drop will be the Mangrove Jacks Raspberry and Lime Craft Series Cider. Following after that, I did a recipe kit myself, which was a lager. It's been really, really awesome drinking that over the hot summer. One that I haven't tried yet, but I'm super excited about, was the Mangrove Jacks Craft Series. It's either the American Pale Ale or the American IPA. Can't quite remember, but it's a Craft Series one. It smelled awesome. The tastes from the child jar were awesome, so super looking forward to that. If you enjoy these videos, feel free to give us a thumbs up, really helps us out. If you've got any questions, got any comments, feel free to get engaged below. I'm pretty active, so I always reply and happy to get into a bit of a conversation. All that said, Mangrove Jacks Craft Series Kveik IPA. Cheers.
Cheers.